Every person in the world makes mistakes, nobody is perfect. But sometimes, a combination of wrong actions leads to such massive consequences that one question echoes in the mind: how did this happen? Today, we'll talk about the biggest mistakes, the effects of which cost a hefty sum. Collapse of a multi-apartment building. The residential complex Lotus Riverside in Shanghai consisted of 11 high-rises. Until one morning, one of the 13-story buildings collapsed miraculously without touching other structures or triggering a domino effect. The cause of the collapse was the disregard of construction norms and poor foundation quality. Accidental destruction of a 150-year-old guitar. The guitar used by Jennifer Jason Leigh in Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight was a genuine 150-year-old rarity. It was rented from the Martin Guitar Museum. It was supposed that before the next scene, the 19th-century six-string guitar would be replaced with a prop, but this wasn't done. Apparently, Kurt Russell wasn't informed, and he smashed the museum piece to pieces. Oversized train cars and narrow platforms. In 2014, the SNCF Railways decided to modernize the transport network and ordered 2,000 new trains worth a total of 15 billion euros. The manufacturer was provided with measurements of stations designed in the last 30 years. However, many platforms were built earlier and were slightly narrower. The new trains didn't fit the dimensions of the old stations, so they had to be urgently widened, costing an additional 50 million euros. Loss of $225 million due to a typo. The Japanese company Mizuho Securities wanted to sell one share for 610,000 yen on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. But due to carelessness, the broker made a mistake when entering the data. He put up for sale 610,000 shares for only 1 yen. Despite the company's protests, the exchange processed the order, leading to a loss of $225 million. One can only guess whether the error was truly accidental. A submarine too heavy to surface. The Spanish government ordered the construction of the new submarine, the Isaac Peral, for £1.75 billion, but during construction, it was found to be too heavy and at risk of not resurfacing after submersion. It turned out that someone made a mistake in the calculations at the very beginning. To correct this embarrassing misunderstanding, it was necessary to solve the problem of excess weight and increase the length of the hull. The cost of this was not disclosed, but it's clear that it involved a huge sum. Sale of Alaska. In the late 19th century, the Russian Emperor Alexander II saw Alaska only as land with a lot of ice cover. In March 1867, it was decided to sell the vast territory to the United States for only $7.2 million. Since the exchange rate of the ruble and the dollar was almost equal at that time, Russia gained almost nothing from this deal but lost natural resources worth billions of dollars. According to modern estimates, it's already in the trillions. The Dancing Millennium Bridge. The Millennium Bridge, connecting the two banks of the Thames in London, was opened in 2000. And almost immediately, it was closed. It turned out that in crowded conditions, it began to sway dangerously. To the initial cost of the bridge of £18.2 million, another £5 million had to be added to carry out reconstruction and add stabilizers. Now it's safe to use. Not so expensive compared to the loss of Alaska. Loss of a spacecraft. The Mars Climate Orbiter spacecraft was developed by NASA to study the climate on Mars. However, due to a silly mistake, contact with the spacecraft, already in the atmosphere, was lost. One NASA team used English units, feet and yards, while the other used metric units. As a result, the spacecraft entered the Martian atmosphere too low and disintegrated. Sale of Apple shares. Ronald Wayne was one of the founders of Apple. He designed the first logo and wrote the manual for Apple I. In 1976, he sold his 10% stake for $800. The main reason for the sale was that he had assets that could be seized if the company went bankrupt. And now he could have been a billionaire. As of the date of this video, Apple is worth $2.91 trillion. Skyscraper that melts cars. Thanks to its concave shape and glass surface, the London skyscraper walkie-talkie became a giant mirror. The scorching reflections were so bright that they melted parked cars nearby. And some enthusiasts even fried eggs on them. To prevent further damage, a sunshade was attached to the building. It wasn't so expensive, but it completely undermined the architect's idea. Drained lake. In 1980, in search of oil, an entire lake was drained, which was more than 13 billion liters of fresh water. Due to a calculation error during drilling, the drill pierced the dome above the salt mine under Lake Peigneur, USA. Over time, the water eroded the salt, creating a small hole that quickly turned into a huge cavity. A whirlpool formed, sucking in the drilling rig, 11 barges, a tugboat, trucks, and even an island. Miraculously, no one was harmed. Discarded bitcoins. In 2009, bitcoins had just come into existence, so they were relatively easy to earn. Which is what the Englishman James Howells did, accumulating 7,500 digital coins. However, back then, they were worth almost nothing. By 2013, the value of these coins had risen to $7.5 million. When the guy realized his luck, he found out that he had mistakenly thrown away the hard drive with the bitcoins in the trash. Today, that's almost $320 million. Sunk ship Vasa. The ship Vasa, commissioned by the king, was supposed to become the flagship of the Swedish fleet in the 17th century. But it failed to even leave Stockholm harbor and sank immediately after leaving the shipyard. Due to incorrect design, the ship was very unstable. With the first gust of wind, it capsized, quickly sinking in front of thousands of city residents. At that time, military ships were a very expensive luxury. Collapsed bridge section. The bridge over the Han River in Seoul became infamous after its collapse. In the morning of 1994, during rush hour, the central span of the bridge couldn't bear the load and fell into the river. Along with it, cars and full buses with passengers fell. Unfortunately, it wasn't without casualties. The cause of the collapse was cited as poorly welded steel structures supporting the plates. Perhaps it was cheaper than 7,500 bitcoins, but human lives are worth more than all the money in the world. What catastrophic mistakes do you know about?